Hey guys, thanks for joining me for yet another time to study God's Word. And I'll be honest with you, this week I had a choice between having a rather short lesson or a rather lengthy lesson. And for your sake and mine, we're going to do the short one and have the extended one next week. But this week we'll just look at Genesis chapter 20. We begin with the first two verses that say, "Now Abraham moved on from there into the region of the Negev and lived between Kadesh and Shur. For a while he stayed in Gerar. And there Abraham said of his wife Sarah, 'She is my sister.' Then Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent for Sarah and took her." We're not given the reason as to why Abraham moved on, but we can speculate why he would do such a thing. He had to do it presumably because of his herds. They needed food. Perhaps the pastures in the area had been depleted. I suspect it may also have been because of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. We're told that no vegetation survived in the area because of God's judgment. So naturally, Abraham would have to move his flocks on to another area. Abraham decided to stay a while in Gerar. Now, not much is known about this ancient city, but that it was a Philistine city west of the Dead Sea, somewhere between settled land to the east and grazing land to the west, which would be important to Abraham at this time. You'd think that Abraham would have learned from his embarrassing and possibly life-threatening experience some 25 years earlier in Egypt, but it isn't so. He lies again about Sarah. "She's my sister." So, as before, the ruler brings Sarah into his harem. We have to wonder why a 90-year-old woman would have such an attraction to Abimelech in the first place, but she was apparently blessed by the Lord with unusual beauty even at this age. Whatever the case, Sarah is taken into the care of the king. The name Abimelech here seems to be a dynastic term for the king of Gerar. In Isaac's time was called Abimelech, as well as King Achish of Gath in David's day. So it's more of a kind of a family name rather than a name as we would know it today. Verses 3 through 5 says, "But God came to Abimelech in a dream one night and said to him, 'You are as good as dead because of the woman you have taken. She is a married woman.' Now Abimelech had not gone near her, so he said, 'Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Did he not say to me, she is my sister? And didn't she also say he is my brother? I have done this with a clear conscience and clean hands.'" God comes to this leader in a dream at night to make him aware of this problem. She is in fact a married woman, so God will judge him for doing such a horrible thing. He is a dead man because he has taken Sarah into his household because she has a husband. You can't help but feel sorry, at least a little bit sorry for Abimelech here. He is technically innocent. He had no way of knowing what he had done wrong. He hasn't done it intentionally by no means. Surely the Lord isn't unjust. Surely he will not judge this man in this nation because he didn't know. Both Abraham and Sarah had lied to him. He did it all with a clear conscience and clean hands. So in verses 6 and 7 we read, "Then God said to him in the dream, 'Yes, I know you did this with a clear conscience, and so I have kept you from sinning against me. That is why I did not let you touch her. Now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not return her, you may be sure that you and all yours will die." Of course, God knew the whole situation here all too well. He knew that it was Abraham and Sarah that had kind of cooked up this ruse. They were the ones that had deceived Abimelech. This is why the Lord had kept the king from being with her or touching her at this point. Now it was up to the king to do the right thing and return her to her husband. The Lord commands him to return her immediately to her husband and identifies Abraham as a prophet here. It's the first use of the term in the Old Testament, and notice it isn't used because Abraham could tell the future, but simply because he would be the one who would intercede on behalf of the king. He would mediate between the Lord and Abimelech. It would be Abraham's intercessory prayer that would save the king from judgment. And it would be Abraham's intercessory prayer that would remove the curse of barrenness from the king's household. Verses 8 through 10 says, "Early the next morning, Abimelech summoned all his officials, and when he told them all that had happened, they were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham in and said, 'What have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you have brought such great guilt upon me and my kingdom? You have done things to me that should not be done.' And Abimelech asked Abraham, 'What was your reason for doing this?'" The king wakes up and immediately goes into action to try and take care of this problem. Abraham is brought before him. He asks Abraham, "How could you do such a thing to me? Why has he intentionally brought such guilt, shame, condemnation upon this king and his kingdom? He's the one that has caused this whole situation." And Abimelech is basically, "I haven't wronged you, have I? Because of this wrong situation that you've put me in." Genesis chapter 20 verse 11 says, "Abraham replied, 'I said to myself, there is surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife.'" Abraham has used the same line of thinking before in Egypt. He knew that the people lacked a fear of the one true God. He knew that they were a part of a paganistic culture. His wife was attractive, so he feared for his life. He feared that they would kill him in order to take her as their own. This, of course, leaves God out of the whole situation. Abraham shows his own doubts and really a doubt of God's protection here. You could say that his faith got a little thin, and plus he is told a half-truth here, as we read in verses 12 and 13. "Besides, she is really my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God had me wander from my father's household, I said to her, 'This is how you can show your love to me. Everywhere we go, say of me, he is my brother.'" Sarah was his half-sister, so he was not technically telling, a whole lie. We know better, though, don't we? Abraham had feared for his life, so he told a whole lie. Not only that, but he had instructed his wife to lie for his sake as well. He even used her love for him as the reason that she should lie. "This is how you show your love for me, Sarah. You lie for me." They'd been telling this same lie for some 25 years now, but Abimelech wasn't buying it after the Lord's revelation to him. So verses 14 and 15 says, "Then Abimelech brought sheep and cattle and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham, and he returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, 'My land is before you, live wherever you like.'" The king goes to some pretty extremes to reveal his sincerity. First, he gives Abraham sheep, cattle, slaves. I think it's more than a little ironic that Abraham profits from his lie here, but nonetheless, the king goes even further by returning Sarah and telling Abraham that he can live wherever he likes to live in the land. He had the freedom to go anywhere in the territory and settle there if he'd like. I'm sure Abimelech wanted him to settle as far away from him as possible, don't you think? Verse 16 says, to Sarah he said, I am giving your brother 1,000 shekels of silver. This is to cover the offense against you before all who are with you. You are completely vindicated. Abimelech goes on to tell Sarah that he was giving Abraham this 1,000 shekels in order to clear up this misunderstanding. Again, because they had lied to the king. I don't know of many times a king would give so much to the ones that were trying to pull the wool over his eyes, but the fear of the Lord was upon Abimelech, and he would have done anything to ensure the Lord's judgment, the Lord's death threat would not come true. He wanted to make it right before it was too late for him and his country. Verses 17 and 18, then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his slave girl, so they could have children again, for the Lord had closed every womb in Abimelech's household because of Abraham's wife Sarah. The king was sincere, so Abraham prayed to God for him. He becomes the intercessor, mediator between the king and God. The Lord was faithful. The king did not die, and what's more, the wombs of his wife and slave girls, everyone in his household, were opened up once again. We have to wonder about this situation. We can't help but have a few questions about it. Why would the Lord vow to kill an innocent man simply because he had lied to the king? Or Abraham and Sarah had lied to the king. How could the Lord be just and yet take this man's life and judge his people? Because of the simple fact is, the Lord is just, and he is just in all that he does. He gave this king full opportunity to repent, do what was right, and he did not suffer death because the Lord, because he had listened to the Lord and he had done what is right. He surely felt that he was innocent here, but when given the command to return Sarah to her husband, he didn't hesitate. Abimelech really looks more trustworthy almost than Abraham at this juncture. And so this is a challenge to us today. Certainly not to lie, to always tell the truth. As Mark Twain is quoted as saying, if you always tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. How true that is. We should always be known for people standing for the truth, particularly what's right in the eyes of God. We might be able to fool some of the people some of the time, but we're never going to fool God, and he's the one we're going to have to answer to. May God bless you. May he keep you. May he give you peace.